Hello. In this video, I read out the Japanese folktales in English. I would be happy if you could press the channel subscription and thumbs up now. Let's begin. Once upon a time, there was a king and a queen. The thing that saddened them most was that they had no children. It was so sad that it was impossible to put into words how sad they were. To that end, they traveled across all the oceans of the world, prayed to the gods, made offerings at temples, and offered their faith in many ways, but it was all in vain. But eventually, the truth of their faith prevailed, and the queen gave birth to a baby girl. So they immediately decided to hold a grand celebration, and all the girls in the kingdom were called to be the princesses' godmothers. There were 7 of them in total. According to the custom of their own group of fairies, each of the 7 fairies was to bring a wonderful gift. So from the moment of her birth, the princess was equipped with everything that was in this world. After the baptism ceremony, the 7 fairies returned to the king's castle, where a wonderful feast had been prepared for the fairies. On each table was a set of dishes and cups, and these were spoons, knives, and forks in large golden boxes, all of which were gold and studded with diamonds and rubies. Now, when everyone had arrived at the table, he suddenly noticed a very old witch coming slowly into the hall, from whence and where. However, this witch had not been invited to the party. The reason was that this old witch had hidden herself in a cave 50 years ago, and was thought to have either died or been bewitched and turned into something. The king hurriedly had a set of tableware placed in front of the witch. However, this was no longer the same as the tableware placed in the large golden box. Since there were supposed to be 7 guests, only enough tableware for 7 people had been prepared. Then the old witch, feeling that she alone had been disrespected, began to mutter something to herself. At that time, one of the other young witches was standing nearby and quietly listened to the old woman's long-winded words. She realized that the old woman was plotting to give the princess some evil gift, so when the meal was over and everyone rose from their tables, the witch hid behind the curtain. She thought that if she stayed hidden like this, she would come out after the old woman, and immediately say something to erase the curse, and use it as a gift for the princess. Meanwhile, the fairies were finally ready to give the princess a gift. The youngest said that she should be the most beautiful person in the world. The next said that she should have an angelic heart. The third said that she should be gentle and graceful in her behavior. The fourth said that she should be an unrivaled dancer. The fifth said that she should sing with a gentle voice like a baying bird. The sixth said that she should be able to use the name of the god on any instrument. Finally, it was the old fairy's turn. Shaking her head in disgust, she said that the princess would pierce her hand with the spindle of the spinning wheel and die from the injury. This terrible gift frightened everyone so much that they shivered, and no one was able to help but cry for the princess. At that moment, a young fairy came out from behind the curtain and said the following words in a very loud voice. "No, my king and my queen, it's okay. Your precious grandmother will not lose her life. However, I do not have the strength to completely remove the curse that I have placed on her since she was old. She will surely spin her hair in the palm of her hand, but she will not lose her life because of it. She will simply sleep soundly and not wake up for 100 years. Then, exactly in the 100th year, a prince from a certain country will come and wake her up." The king wanted to somehow avoid the curse that the little girl's grandmother had predicted. So that very day, a proclamation was made throughout the kingdom that no one was to use a spinning wheel. Not even a single spinning wheel was to be kept inside the house. Anyone who disobeyed this rule would be punished. The king severely scolded them. Then, 15 or 16 years passed by peacefully. One day, the king and queen went on a trip to the castle together. While they were there, the young princess was running around the castle. As she ran from the lower room to the upper room, and finally entered the small room at the top of the tower. She looked and saw a kind-looking old woman sitting there by herself, spinning thread. It seemed that the old woman hadn't listened to the strict decree of the king that said she was not allowed to use the spindle. "Grandmother, what are you doing there?" the princess asked. "Oh, my dear little boy, I'm spinning thread," the old woman replied. The old woman didn't seem to know at all who the princess was. "Oh," the princess said. "How beautiful. How do you do it? Let me see. I want to see if I can do it." The princess said this and took the spindle in her hand, but perhaps she was holding it the wrong way, or perhaps she was in a hurry and held it clumsily, or perhaps the time had come when the evil girl's cursed words would finally show their signs, because suddenly the spindle stuck in the princess's hand, and she fell to the ground. The kind old woman hurriedly called for help. Everyone came running out from both sides of the castle. They poured water on the princess's face, untied her robes, slapped her hands, rubbed her temples with a medicine called Queen of Hungary's water, and tried all sorts of things, but the princess still did not regain her breath. When the king heard all this, he rushed over to help her. And remembering the prophecy of the girl 15 years ago, he realized that this was indeed what was going to happen, so he had the princess taken to the finest room in the castle, and laid her on a beautiful table decorated with gold and silver sewn figures. The princess was so beautiful as she slept soundly on the table. She looked like a little angel. Though she had become uncomfortable, her face was as it would be if she were alive. Her cheeks were red and her lips were like coral. Her eyes were closed, but they could hear her breathing. The people around her were delighted to see that the princess was not dead. The king then gave her strict orders to stay in bed until someone came and woke her up. The good-hearted enchantress, who had put the princess to sleep for 100 years and had barely managed to save her life, was in Matakin, 12,000 miles away, when the commotion began, and immediately received the news from her servant. The dwarf ran away in boots called 7-li boots, which could travel 7 li in one stride. So the girl immediately left the place, got into a fiery carriage pulled by a dragon, and arrived at the king's castle in exactly 1 hour. The king personally helped the enchantress out of the carriage. The enchantress said that everything the king had done was fine. However, since the enchantress was very good at seeing into the future, he thought that the princess would wake up 100 years later, but find herself alone in this old castle, not knowing what to do, and would be in a lot of trouble. So what did he do? The fairy woman waved her magic wand, and touched everything in the castle except the king and queen, from the attendant, the lady-in-waiting, the maid, the servant, the chief cook, the chef, the waiter, the kitchen boy, the guard, the Swiss soldier, and the errand boy. Then, in the same way, she touched the horse sleeping in the stable, the dog playing in the backyard, and even the puppy sleeping on the princess's bed. As soon as he touched the magic wand, everyone and everything fell into a carefree sleep, and they would not wake up until the princess woke up, and would wake up whenever the princess needed them. And when they said everything was asleep, even the skewer in front of the stove fell asleep with pheasant and yamadori meat still on it. All this was done in the blink of an eye. Girls are really quick at work. So the king and queen gently stroked the princess's forehead and left the castle. And so, he again sent out a strict decree throughout the country that no one was to approach the castle. But there was no need to issue this decree, for within 15 minutes, many tall and low trees had begun to grow thickly among the trees surrounding the castle, and thorns and undergrowth had become so thickly entangled between them that neither man nor beast could pass through. That's that.